Welcome again to the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk, Mississippi. We're glad to be with you this morning. Lance, you played the music. Name that tune.
Well, I was hoping that the good professor could remember his original alma mater. I know he's well-traveled. He's been all over. He's got degrees from every place on the planet. But what fight song is that, sir?
Give my regards to Davey, the Cornell University fight song. Go Big Red.
My man.
Beautiful, beautiful. Glenn Antizzo is a professor of political science at Mississippi College. We're going to talk about a lot of things. I think he's good to hang with us for a couple of segments.
Absolutely.
We're going to talk about what's going on in the Middle East. Professor, I would like to play a clip for you to start things off this morning. I think I've got this here handy. And here's the larger question that I've got. And this is not a right or a left thing. It's more an observer of the way certain groups of people are talked to. We'll get to the clip in a second. Just kind of big picture question first. When I hear the way that Kamala Harris in particular, but it's not just unique to her, speaks specifically to black men or black people, and the way that she speaks to rural Americans, it's like there's a talking down to them like, oh, well, they're not really capable of getting voter ID, of proving where they live or where they are a resident of. And it strikes me, I'm like, what year is this?
Yeah.
The idea that because you live in the country, you don't have access to a copying machine, or because you are a black person that lives in an urban environment, you don't know how to get to the DMV to get voter ID. Why is it that we continue to speak to groups in this way?
Well, these are leftover talking points from like the 1960s. And I think you're right. I think a lot of it is absolutely insulting. One of my students, African American, I might add, sent me her talking points about her plans for the black community. And I found the fifth point probably the most insulting: legalizing recreational weed so that black men will have a business opportunity. Basically, you're telling them that they're drug dealers? I mean, that's their future? I mean, seriously, I would be insulted. My student was insulted, yeah. And I think that you're right. I think there's a lot of talking down. I think what they think is that they are offering some sort of big government solution because, and it's not just minorities. I think they think all people are not capable of standing on their own 2 feet unless the government is there to prop them up.
I guess if you're a fan of big government, then that's right up your alley.
Yeah.
And if you aren't, then you see a problem with that. It's funny you said that about those 5 points for black men. I showed my wife that last night, and she looked at it and she goes, wait, that's not real. Yeah, like that's not real. They didn't. She's like, we're going to legalize marijuana, black men, so you can have a big time? What?
Not only that, but also, isn't this aren't liberals the ones who were telling us for years that smoking is bad for you and that you shouldn't be smoking? and then, but they want you to smoke an unfiltered, joint or blunt or whatever. Yeah. And then on top of that, well, it's the same. It's not any worse than alcohol. Yeah, the problem is that I can't get secondhand drunk. I'm sitting there, I'm breathing in your smoke.
Yeah. No contact eye there at all. Glenn Antizzo, professor of political science at Mississippi College. It feels to me as if the only moment of decorum that we have had in this entire campaign was the vice presidential debate. Mm-hmm. I thought for the most part, J.D. Walls I did that yesterday, J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. I'm just making them one person. It looked like what we used to think a presidential debate was supposed to look like. Yes. And this was the two VP candidates. Are we past the point of no return, or is this simply a function of Donald Trump being in this political environment, and as we move into the future, some level of decorum will return to presidential politics?
Yeah, no, I think it clearly will return. I think it, and it's not just Trump. It's Trump in the respect that Trump does say a few things. He's not a polished, refined politician. because that's not what people want. A lot of people want somebody who is going to agitate things and it's going to stir things up a little bit. Now, I would argue that he takes it to rhetorical excess on many occasions. But at the same time, he is causing people on the other side to react in ways. I listened to MSNBC this morning before I came in, and it was nothing but pure demagoguery about how he's a threat to democracy. This will be the last election.
Was this Joe and Mika or before they got started?
No, it was Joe and Mika, and they had a panel of about 5 people with them, and it was the usual, hysteria about how, democracy is doomed if Donald Trump makes it back into office. Yeah, and I think that
there was a time when that was actually an interesting show. Like if you go back to the mid 2000s, that was an interesting place to watch and kind of get a little bit different perspective where they balanced things out before they went nuts.
Well, that was back when Joe Scarborough was still actually a moderate Republican. And he's abandoned that a long time ago. The entire network is hard left. To be honest with you, in my opinion, I think that they are further to the left than Fox is to the right. Fox is clearly on the right, but they are significantly further to the left.
All right, let me ask you this. As someone who studies political science and teaches it and keeps up with all that's going on, where do you go for your news? Like if you want, I would like to read this without having to put a filter on it to go, okay, was this written by somebody on the right? Was it written by somebody on the left? Can I just read it and know actually what happened? Where do you go for your news?
I go to a variety of sources. I do watch all 3 networks. I tend not to go as heavily to MSNBC, but I do watch CNN. I do watch Fox. And then I used to go to the Drudge Report every morning and get some headlines there. But unfortunately, Drudge has taken a very hard turn to the left. It's my understanding that Matt Drudge doesn't run it anymore, that it was taken over a few years ago by some people who purchased it, I think, in 2018. And it's I didn't notice any leftward turn until the last few months. But, I mean, even just looking at the headlines this morning, you'll see it's taken a pretty hard turn to the left. But I try to go to a variety of online sources, mostly mainstream sources. You got to try to filter out the craziness on the left and the right. And if you're getting your news from social media, you're probably making a huge mistake. I obviously read things with a skeptical eye. And I try to, before I'll believe anything, I usually try to get it from 2 credible sources first. Because I have people who give me information all the time and I find out later that it could not be further from the truth, or that they got a particular spin on it. And like I said, I would rather digest the news myself. So I try to get, high-quality journalistic sources for the most part, although I recognize that everybody brings their baggage to the table when they're writing articles.
Sure. We're visiting with Glenn Antizzo. He's a professor of political science at Mississippi College. Polling is such an interesting topic because polls have bias as well. If you've followed Mark Halperin at all in recent weeks, he's talked to people about something I don't think a lot of people knew existed. You got the public poll, right? The New York Times poll, the Quinnipiac poll, and Fox runs a poll, and NBC News runs a poll. But then the campaigns have private polling as well. And sometimes those numbers tend to be a little more accurate. But then you also have in the last decade or so the poly market, which is the betting odds that are out there as a predictor of electoral outcomes. Do you put much stock in the betting market kind of observations that are out there? Yeah,
I think I do, because I think it's sort of a counterbalance to the polling. One of the problems of polling is the methodology that you use. Obviously, you try to recreate the population that you're looking at by who you're calling. But keep in mind, of course, I might be the last guy on earth who still has a landline at home.
Do you really?
Yeah, no, I do. Because there are certain things I just don't trust to do over a cell phone, like anything having to do with, finances. Like, for example, if I want to pay a bill by, doing it over, I do it over the phone in some cases, in order to pay my credit card.
Fair enough.
But in any case, the point I was going to make about that is that a lot of people aren't answering the phone, especially if it's a cell phone. Oh my God! Unless I know who it is, I'm probably not going to answer the phone. I'll wait and see if they leave a message, and then I'll get back to them. Otherwise, I figure it's a phone solicitor. And so a lot of people are not answering calls from polling companies because they don't know who it is that's calling them.
Yeah. It's funny. Years ago, I put on my voicemail on my cell phone, "Sorry I missed you. Shoot me a text message, and I'll get right back to you."
Yeah.
Shoot me a message. Let me know who this is, and I'll call you back. I'll ask you the same thing I asked Lance just a little while ago when we come back. Tell me one thing good that Kamala did in the interview yesterday, and then one thing that was not so good. We'll start with that when we come back. This is the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
House of Representatives, and they vote on me.
If they vote yes, what happens?
Then I go to the Senate, and the whole thing starts all over again.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And if they vote for me on Capitol Hill, well, then I'm off to the White House where I'll wait in a line with a lot of...
Welcome back.
You did.
Oh, that is not the Cornell fight song.
No.
Welcome back. This is the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk, Mississippi. Richard Cross, Lance in the studio, and Glenn Antizzo, professor of political science at Mississippi College, is our guest. I gave you a heads up before we went to the break. I did this with Lance earlier. I said, let's not be the far right that only looks at it one way or the far left that only looks at it the other way. Tell me something good that you heard from Kamala Harris, if you heard anything in her interview with Bret Baier on Fox last night, and then something where she was not good in a particular area.
Okay, well, the good, she did, just to sort of repeat, I think, something that Lance said earlier when he was giving his two, that I don't think she really won any points in terms of policy, because it seems to me like she walked around a lot of that. But she did show on a few occasions a fire in her belly that I don't know if a lot of people know if it existed or not before yesterday. She did get indignated a few times, and I think that she did show a strength in her conviction that she was going to be the type of person who would push back, and that's something I think Americans want in a president. I think, to be honest with you, I think it's one of the things that people like about Trump, and I think it's something that people even liked about Hillary Clinton when she was running. That you thought that if she's going into some hard negotiations with somebody else, President Xi of China or Putin in Russia or whatever, that she'll be sitting across from them. Maybe she will get her back up. Maybe she will, put up a strong fight. And, you want to see that fire in the belly. That's
and with a female candidate, and this is a completely unfair double standard, there is such a fine line there between, I think the word you used a second ago was indignant, and willing to stand up and fight versus being loud, angry, yelling woman, as she's which was the case when Hillary Clinton was running. She was categorized that way, and Kamala, for some of last night, has been characterized that way as well.
Yeah, no, one of the things, I thought about Hillary Clinton when she ran in 2016, and to be honest with you, earlier when she'd run in 2008, I thought that, maybe she would be really tough because she had that sort of a cold demeanor in a sense, and could be really somebody that would be tough to go up against. And I liked the idea, at least at first, when Obama appointed her as Secretary of State, because I thought that she was the type of person that should be on the other side of the table when a hard negotiation is supposed to happen. So Kamala did show me a little bit of that last night. Not much, but enough that it got my attention.
Okay.
As far as the bad, she did not appear to answer any question in any substantive way. If you were looking for knowledge of her policies, I don't think you really got it. I think for the most part, she stuck to pre-programmed talking points that she knew she wanted to go in there and say. And to be honest with you, I think that a lot of people have already made up their minds on this election, and so I don't think she really scored too many points. And I think, just to get beyond the interview yesterday, I think she's also making a mistake tonight not going to the Al Smith dinner in New York.
Yeah, and there were a lot of people that were hoping that at some point she was going to change her mind on that. And she hasn't. She's sucked her guns on that. Not going to be there with Donald Trump, who is like the only person that has ever kind of broken decorum at Al Smith. Like he went after Hillary Clinton at that dinner in 2016, and there were people like, "Wait, what? We're supposed to laugh at each other here?" And he was like, "Nope, another campaign event."
Yeah.
Does that give him a bigger stage tonight?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think what you're going to find is that it will be carried tonight. I'm pretty sure Fox is going to be carrying it. I don't know since MSNBC yeah, I was going to say seems to be sort of the media arm of the Harris campaign. I don't know if they're necessarily going to be carrying it tonight. I would think CNN might carry it. And it will certainly be something that a lot of news broadcasts are going to be starting with tonight. That
Sure.
Donald Trump was here. I understand why she's not doing it. I think that she wants to not repeat the same mistake Hillary Clinton made in 2016. In that, you've got three particular, Great Lakes states: Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, that Hillary Clinton in the last week or two of the campaign just ignored, because she just took it for granted she was going to win those states, because Democrats usually do. And as a result, all three of those states went for Trump in 2016. And I think that they realize this is a tight race, and they cannot afford to have any of their home territory, quote unquote, overlooked. And I think that they're pretty hopeful that maybe they can pull off another win in Georgia. And if they can hang on to those three states and get Georgia, I think they're pretty much done. Although you look at the polling data from most of the battleground states, and it's Trump with an ever so slight lead. Everything is within the margin of error on those polls. So I would take everything with a grain of salt, maybe even a 5-pound bag of salt. But at the same time, also, the polls do tend to understate, I think, Trump's strength, because people tend to tell pollsters what they want the pollster to hear. On a certain level, I think people want the pollsters to like them. And so they tell them not necessarily what's on their mind, but rather what they think the pollster wants to hear.
Your point's an interesting one. It's one that second time I've referenced Mark Halper, and I think he's actually doing a really good job with some of his coverage right now. He was talking about these state-by-state polls, and he said, if Kamala leads by 2 in one of these polls, it's scary. 3 feels like a tie. 4 is where they want to be. In terms of kind of that skew that you're talking about as well. This is a great transition, because I wanted to walk through these 7 swing states that have kind of been thrown out there, and get your thought as we move toward Election Day, 19 days away. Georgia, ultimately, how does it go?
Georgia, I think that, for me, that's almost the toughest one to do. I got my master's at the University of Georgia, so I lived in Athens for 3 years.
Hunker down.
And I can tell you that, Atlanta has always been left. But the suburbs around Atlanta, when I was a student at Georgia in the late 80s and early 90s, were solidly Republican. Places like Gwinnett County, Cobb County, those have changed. Yeah. Gwinnett, you may recall, I believe in the last election went pretty heavily for Biden. DeKalb was the epicenter of all of people's worries, because they shut down the counting of the ballots at like 2 o'clock in the morning and said, well, we'll be back at 7 a.m. And people started to wonder, because after that, Biden shot ahead while Trump was leading earlier, and people thought there may have been some shenanigans. It's my understanding that the suburbs, which were largely white and conservative, are now a lot more diverse. I think there's a heavier Hispanic population. However, keep in mind, Hispanics are more likely to vote Republican than African Americans are, although African American men definitely seem to be moving in Trump's direction. So that's going to be a tough one. That's going to be a tough one. That's the one of all the ones, I think actually that might be the hardest to call. I think that
North Carolina,
the hurricane is going to be a big factor. Two aspects of that. Number one is, will people be able to vote at polling stations in a normal way? Also, with all of the damage done, Will you be able to get absentee ballots to people if you can't set up the polling stations? And would those be able to get back in a reasonable amount of time?
And Asheville notwithstanding, Western North Carolina is Trump country.
Yeah. Basically, you could divide the state into three sectors. Eastern North Carolina tends to be fairly liberal because it's heavily African American. Western North Carolina, from I-77 west to the Tennessee state line, tends to be very Republican, except, as you said, for like Asheville. And then the battleground is in the middle, between I-95 in the east and I-77 in the west. You have the Piedmont area with the metro areas like Raleigh-Durham, Greensboro, Charlotte. And that tends to be the battleground areas, with the cities themselves being fairly liberal and the suburban areas being pretty conservative. I think that North Carolina is something that the Republicans will pull out. Let me just say one other thing about the hurricane on that, though. The government response is going to make a huge difference. If this is perceived to be Katrina 2.0 and that people feel like they're being neglected, that is going to come back and bite the administration in the backside.
Yeah, if those people feel like they have not been taken care of, I wonder if they make more effort to make sure that their vote is counted on that particular, during this particular cycle, than perhaps they would have otherwise.
Yeah.
You got time to hang with us to the end of the hour?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, I want to finish this exercise. We'll talk about Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada. Those are the remaining ones. I feel like I'm missing one. Oh, Ohio. That's the other one that's hanging out there in terms of the 7 swing states. There certainly is a path for both candidates to 270.
Yes,
obviously, but how wide a path is it for Donald Trump? How wide a path is it for Kamala Harris? We're visiting with Glenn Antizzo. He is a professor of political science at Mississippi College. We will wrap up the 7 o'clock hour with him and with you when we come back. This is the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. Thanks for being with us this morning. This is the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. Just a quick reminder, a heads up, if you are one of those people who prints out a map and you color states in on election night as they're announced, and you've got an old table that gives you electoral votes in that count to get to 270, it's different than it was 4 years ago. Republicans gained Republican-leaning states. Republican states gained a net of 3 electoral college votes, 2 more in Texas for them, 1 more in Florida, 1 more in Montana. Lost an electoral college vote in both Ohio and West Virginia. I didn't say that the right way. These are the states that picked up a vote or lost a vote.
Right.
But when you kind of use predictive maps for how this year might go, it looks like there could be 3 votes picked up for red states. We'll see. Somebody corrected me on the text line. They said, Ohio, what are you talking about? That is a solid red state. Super solid there, no concern in Ohio? Or do you still have Ohio in the swing state category?
I think Ohio probably is going to be a state fairly safe for Trump, but keep in mind, of course, that there is a union presence in the state that you sort of got to be mindful of. So I think that probably a state I would maybe substitute for Ohio would be Arizona.
Okay. And that's where I was headed next.
Okay. Well, where would you like to start on all this? What state would you like to start with?
All right, so we talked about Georgia.
Right.
We talked about
North Carolina.
Right. We've talked briefly about Ohio. So that leaves us with Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona.
Okay, let's start. I took a few notes while we were in the break, and let's start off with Pennsylvania.
Yep.
It's part of the country I'm familiar with because I'm from New York originally, and James Carville once put it very well that Pennsylvania is Philadelphia in the east, Pittsburgh in the west, and Alabama in the middle. It is largely a rural state. The middle part of the state and the northern tier on the New York State border are largely Republican country. It's rural area. The only place where you will find a pocket of Democrat voters is going to be in the State College area, or because of Penn State University's presence. But other than that, I think Philadelphia, rather, is probably going to go to Harris because it's a heavily African American city. But I think that Pittsburgh may be a little problematic for her this time, and it's going to be a problem that she's going to face in Michigan as well. And that is that you have a heavy union presence there. And while the leaders of the unions are solidly in her camp, the rank and file aren't. And you've seen that reflected in a number of unions that have refused to make an endorsement of either candidate because the leaders really want to go with Harris, but they don't want to anger the people that are paying the dues. I think this is going to be won and lost probably in the suburbs around Philadelphia, I would imagine. Although, look for a swing in the African-American vote. Again, you have a strong presence in the Philadelphia area, and there definitely seems to be a movement, not a majority, but enough to make a difference. Republicans typically only get about 8 to 10% of the African American vote, but African American men in particular seem to be swinging. And I've seen one poll, and it may be an outlier, but that suggests that it could be as many as 25% of African American men vote Republican this time.
I'll let you. Let's go to Arizona because
Okay.
we've only got 2 minutes left.
Sure.
I think Arizona is a fascinating state. That's a state that Trump did not win in 2020, part of the reason that he lost the election.
Yeah, well, again, it's a state that's been heavily colonized by California now. You've got a lot of people trying to escape the high taxes and outrageous real estate values in California. So they've moved to Arizona for a better life. But unfortunately, a lot of those people bring their liberal politics with them. And when looking for paradise, they end up recreating what they left. But I think, of course, that the border may end up being a big issue there. You have public services that are being overwhelmed by people coming. And, whether or not you're here legally or not, your kids still have a right to go to public schools. And you're going to be using other public services. And I think that may be getting on the nerves of people, particularly in the urban centers, because Tucson's only about a 45-minute drive from the border, and I think Phoenix is only an hour and a half beyond that. So I think that that's another one of those states that's going to be really hard to pick. I would put it sort of lean Republican. But the problem is in North Carolina and Arizona that you've got candidates, the Republican governor candidate in North Carolina, the Senate candidate in Arizona, who may be a drag on the ticket. And it's asking a lot of voters to sort of split, voting Republican for president, but voting for another major office like that for the Democrats.
Kari Lake situation in Arizona, and the governor that
Robinson in North
kind of went
Carolina.
off the rails. He's certainly got problems. Thank you so much for your time, Glenn Antizzo, Mississippi College professor of political science. Enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
I want to talk about this next time you're on. Texas, obviously solidly red for a long time, but some of the same issues that you were talking about with Arizona, with that California population, things are getting tighter and tighter there. Will Texas forever be a Republican stronghold? We don't have time today, but we'll get to that next time. Thanks so much, Professor.
My pleasure. Thank you.